You know, in our hyper-connected world, we're always being told to do our own research, right? But what if your knowledge was just true because you knew it? Today, we're going to dive into an ancient Indian philosophy called Mimamsa that gets right into that very idea. And it all starts with one simple question. Seriously, think about it. The last time you saw a friend's face in a crowd, you just knew it was them, didn't you? Did you have to stop and ask someone else to confirm it? Of course not. That instinctive certainty, well, that's exactly what the Mimamsa school of thought is all about. So, where did an idea like this even come from? Well, to really get Mimamsa, we have to travel back in time, to the world it was born into. Because this wasn't just some abstract thought experiment for scholars. Oh no. This philosophy had a very specific mission. It was designed to be a protector.
So picture this. In ancient India, you've got these foundational scriptures, the Vedas, that have been the bedrock of society for ages. But now people are starting to question them. New philosophies like Buddhism are popping up and gaining a lot of traction. And, well, faith in the old ways is starting to shake. It was a real crisis of authority, and something had to be done to defend the wisdom of the Vedas.
And this is where Mimamsa steps onto the stage. Now, the name itself is a huge clue. It doesn't mean blind faith or anything like that. It actually means critical investigation. The whole goal was to build this ironclad logical system to prove that the knowledge inside the Vedas wasn't just something you believe in, it was a matter of fact. Okay, so how in the world do you logically prove that a sacred text is true? Well, the Mimamsa thinkers started with a pretty radical idea. And it wasn't about the text itself, but about the very nature of knowledge. All right, so this brings us to the main event, the central debate. On one side, you have Mimamsa, and they're championing a theory called svatah pramanya-vada. It's this idea that knowledge is self-validating. The moment you know something, its truth is just part of it. But they had a rival school, the Nyaya school, and they argued for the complete opposite, paratah pramanya-vada. Their idea was that all knowledge needs some kind of outside proof before you can say it's valid.
Now, I know this sounds super abstract, so let's bring it down to earth with a simple, everyday example.
So from the Mimamsa point of view, it's totally seamless. You see the auto, the knowledge, hey, that's an auto, just pops into your head and you act on it. It's immediate, it's self-evident. You don't pause and form a committee to decide if you should stick your hand out.
But if we follow the Nyaya school's logic, things would get, well, kind of ridiculous. You'd see the auto, but before you could do anything, you'd theoretically need to find someone else on the street and ask, "Excuse me, can you just confirm for me that what I'm seeing is, in fact, an auto rickshaw?" The Mimamsa thinkers basically said, come on, that would grind daily life to a complete halt. Their point was, for life to even function, our knowledge just has to be self-validating. Okay, that makes a lot of sense for everyday stuff, but it brings up a huge question, right? What about when we're wrong? I mean, we all make mistakes. Our senses can totally fool us. Don't worry, Mimamsa had a really clever answer for this too.
Here's the really brilliant part of their thinking. They said that while truth is intrinsic, it's built into knowledge, falsehood is extrinsic. It comes from the outside. So your knowledge is assumed to be true by default. It's only when something from the outside world, new information, or maybe a friend correcting you, proves it wrong, that it becomes invalid. You assume the traffic light is green until a blaring car horn tells you it absolutely is not. And of course, to explain all this systematically, they developed a whole framework called khyati-vada, which basically translates to the theory of error. It's their way of categorizing all the different ways our perception can lead us down the wrong path. They boiled it down to two main types of error. First, there's an error because you're working with incomplete info. Think about catching a quick glance of a stranger across the street and thinking you know them. You're just not seeing the whole picture. The second type is an error of misperception, where your senses are actively playing tricks on you. This is that classic example of seeing a rope in a dark room and jumping because you think it's a snake. So this whole theory of knowledge and error, it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. See, the Mimamsa school was incredibly thorough. They went ahead and outlined every single valid way a person can actually acquire knowledge. So how many valid sources of knowledge did they end up accepting? Was it just one or two, like what you see with your own eyes or what someone tells you? Nope. They identified a grand total of 6. These 6 sources are called the pramanas. They start with the ones you'd expect: perception, what you see; inference, what you figure out logically; and testimony, what reliable people tell you. But then they get way more interesting. There's comparison, knowing what a bison is because someone says it looks like a big cow. And postulation, knowing something must be true because it's the only explanation. And my personal favorite, non-perception, the knowledge you get from an absence. Knowing for a fact there is no jar on the table is itself a valid piece of knowledge. How cool is that?
So, let's take a breath. We've got a theory of self-validating knowledge, a theory of error, and 6 different ways of knowing. But what was this all for? What was the ultimate point of building this incredible system? And here it is. This is where it all clicks into place. This entire complex, brilliant philosophical system was built for one reason and one reason only: to create an unshakable, logical foundation for the authority of the Vedas. The logic goes like this. If knowledge from a valid source is self-evidently true, and the Vedas are the ultimate valid source, then their teachings have to be accepted as absolute truth, period. See, the Mimamsa school argued that the Vedas weren't written by any person. They believed they are eternal, authorless, and because of that, totally free from any human error. This makes them the one, single, perfect, and infallible source for understanding Dharma. The cosmic order, our duties, the right way to live. Everything else we talked about, the entire philosophy of knowledge, was the machine they built to prove this ultimate point. So let's bring this ancient idea right into our world today. Mimamsa tells us that our knowledge is valid on its own. But in an age of fake news, AI-generated images, and deepfakes, how far can we really trust that initial gut feeling? How do we balance our own perception with the very real need for external verification? It's a question that's thousands of years old, but it has never been more relevant. Something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.